Sukharthina kuto vidya, vidyarthina kuto sukham. This was something which my mom used to tell me as a kid in order to motivate me to work harder. What it translates to? It translates literally to that if you are a seeker of sukh or of comforts, then you cannot walk on the path of gaining new knowledge. But if you are a vidyarthi, if you are a seeker of knowledge, then your life is kind of miserable. So, in my early days, I actually used to feel that this misery is associated just with exams and ranks and, those things which are related to it. But as I grew up, I realized that there is something more to it. We humans have made a lot of progress. We have done developments in science, in technology, in health, in art, in whatnot. We have done this by constantly going through a process of this misery, by learning the existing knowledge, and then going ahead and asking difficult problems, and then going in the direction of generating new knowledge. Now, this difficult problem can be anything. It could be about creating a new form of art from an existing form of art. It could be about telling stories, and telling the stories in those specific words in which they excite the listener in the same way how it excited you. It could be about running a company. It could be about running an extra mile for the causes which you believe. For all I know, it could also be figuring out a mental trick to make a boring speaker like me disappear. So, all these problems are very difficult and inherently difficult. And we take various different approaches in order to solve these problems. I have taken the approach of physics. What I like about it is essentially the spirit of physics. The spirit of physics, I believe, lies in experiments and mathematics. Now, this spirit kind of makes it very much detached. What I mean by detached is that if a mathematical equation tells you and gives you some knowledge, if an experiment gives you some knowledge, it does not matter what you feel about it. It might be completely non-intuitive to you, but it might end up opening new arenas in knowledge of sciences or in knowledge of nature in general, but it is not dependent on how you feel about it. There is very little wiggle room for subjectivity in this approach. This gives a very beautiful advantage as well. It gives a proof to even to the most of the critical thinkers, which you can present to them, and they can work it out themselves and explore and go towards the truth. What I find extremely beautiful about this approach is that this approach is not always revolving around profits or applications, but it is most of the times revolving around understanding a system, getting and generating new knowledge, and creating curiosity, and addressing and trying to move the horizon of the subject a bit more ahead. Albert Einstein spent more than 10 years in just mastering the techniques of mathematics, which led him to general theory of relativity. Little did he know that those theories today would evolve in something so beautiful that we'll be able to understand the theories of the universe from what he started off. Little did he know that the calculations which he did would be used in GPS, which is there in all of our phones. Isn't this beautiful? This journey of curiosity goes through a path of strangeness and a journey which is very beautiful, and a journey which finally leads to the truth. Today I am going to share 2 examples with you that how sometimes while searching and understanding a complex system, we end up getting answers in the most simple systems around us. And that beauty somewhere lies in the simplicity of the models which we take or consider. The first example which I have is very close to me. I work in nuclear physics, so it's that of a nucleus. So the nucleus was discovered in 1909, and people went really crazy about it. People did not know what to do about it. It was a strange particle. It was existing in the atom, and it was sometimes extremely stable. It was sometimes extremely radioactive, extremely unstable. It was a particle which did not obey the laws of Newton. So how do we understand it? How do we model it? Almost 30 years later, Niels Bohr, George Gamow, and Weizsäcker came up with a very simple idea. They said, well, a nucleus breaks into two. Many times we see that two nucleus come together and become one, which can happen in a liquid drop. A liquid drop can break into two and come together and become one. A liquid drop is held together by surface tension, and a nucleus is also held together by something called as strong forces. So why not let us model this nucleus from a very simple day-to-day example, which is a liquid drop. So Weizsäcker sat down and wrote down an equation describing the drop of liquid, but keeping in mind the property of the nucleus. Once we arrived to these equations, the question is, does it work? And the answer is yes, it works beautifully. Even today, despite of so many technical advancements and so many new technologies to understand and probe the nucleus, we are able to we are able to study various properties of the nucleus using this specific liquid drop model. The beauty here lies in the simplicity of the model. The model began with a very simple idea of modeling the nucleus as a drop of liquid. But it led to great consequences in understanding the system of nucleus and not only developing various further technologies, but also harnessing the nucleus for energy. Another example, so this is history, this is all history. Let me go to my next example. This example is something on which this is an example which I have studied under the guidance of my guide, Dr. Sudhir Ranjan Jain, and with a very young collaborator, Bhagyalakshmi Unnikrishnan. And it goes as follows. Consider that after this session is done, you are going out to have dinner with your friends. You decide to you choose a fancy restaurant with the fundamental understood law that all the friends who are there, they are going to split the bill equally. So now you can do something good. You have an advantage. What you can do is, when you are there in the restaurant, you can order from the expensive side of the menu and you can pay less for it, because the cost will actually be distributed among all the friends. Isn't that nice? But hey, you are not the only one who is smart. All of your friends can do that, and that might lead on burden on everyone's pocket. So what's the best strategy to do? Such situations are called as social dilemmas. A social dilemma occurs whenever you are sharing anything. That the thing which you share is actually called as a public good, which in this case is the bill and the money. The decision you take by considering your selfish gains, in this case having a better meal than others, is called as defection or competition. Competition because you are invariably trying to compete with the price of all the other members in the group. And the decision which you take by actually thinking about everyone in the part of the group is actually called as cooperation. A very wonderful example of this such kind of social dilemma was given by Garrett Hardin in his celebrated essay, The Tragedy of Commons. So the example goes as follows, that if there is a grassland on which some shepherds tend their sheep, and if the number of sheep are in check, there are not too many, then the grassland gets the opportunity to replenish itself, and everyone is happy. The shepherds are happy, the sheep are happy, and the sheep are able to feed throughout the year. But with the increase in population and increase in sheep, when there are more number of sheep on the grassland comes under a stress, and that leads to decrease in the number of grass. This decrease in the number of grass, if not kept in check by any one of the participant members of the society, would lead further into decrease in the number of sheep, which would further lead into no grassland and no sheep. And this will lead into the breakdown of the public good, which in this case was the grassland. Such situations are called as a social trap, because you begin by thinking that you have actually earned something at every step by not taking care of the public good. You have actually earned something more, and you end up, after a peak of profit, you actually end up in losing the entire source, which is the public good itself. And that loss is much bigger than that of the gain which you have, those momentary gains which you have had. Now, how do we model this using physics? A very simple model comes to rescue. So if we want to understand this problem of breakdown of a public good using physics, we get to this very simple model, which I'll come to, and we will see that it actually gives us some wonderful insights mathematically, but those insights can actually be comprehended and can actually be realized even by simple logic. So suppose we have a bundle of fibers, and these bundle of fibers are exposed to a common weight which gives force F on all these bundle of fibers. Now, if there are n fibers, then force on each fiber will be given as F upon n, correct? So, assuming that all these fibers have different thresholds to break, it might so happen that one of these fibers might have threshold less than F upon n. So, this would lead to the breaking of that specific fiber. That fiber has defected from the system. It has refused to participate in the system anymore. What has this led to? This has led to the responsibility which was actually owned by that specific fiber to get distributed in all the other fibers. So the force which was first F upon n on each fiber now has grown to F upon n minus 1 on each of the fiber. So this leads to a very, very nice conclusion. If for the other fiber, the threshold is increased from this F upon n minus 1, then it might lead to other series of ruptures and secondary and tertiary series of ruptures. This shows that defection has actually led to further defection. But there is a good news. If somehow the first fiber could have been stopped from breaking, so the first fiber could have been ensured that it cooperates, the cooperation could have been enforced in some way, then the cooperation would also have been followed by cooperation. So though defection is followed by defection, the good news is cooperation is also followed by cooperation. This can be thought by a very simple example of littering in a public garden. So you have a nice public garden in which nobody litters. It is all neat and nice clean. Then someone with a lower patience comes in and drops litter there. What happens from that is, if the person gets away with it, the other people who are not defecting because who are more likely to litter and who are not defecting because of this social norm might end up defecting and throwing garbage in the public. and thus eventually garbage accumulates, leading to the breakdown of your system, which is the garden. But if the first person who is trying to defect, if the cooperators take a bit of extra effort to tell them and encourage them to cooperate instead of defecting, then it would lead to, it will discourage the other participants who are more likely to defect to cooperate. And it might also lead the defector to pick up the garbage and put it in the dustbin. So this is an example of how cooperation is followed by cooperation and defection is followed by defection. Now, I have established something which is extremely intuitive if thought about, that cooperation is a good thing and defection may not be a good thing, might lead to a breakdown. But these things we actually arrive through proper these things are actually in agreement with the mathematics you do while treating simpler models which mimic such breakdowns. So the question comes is, how do you ensure cooperation? So one of the ways of ensuring cooperation is by appointing a leader who understands the want and wish to cooperate and enforces cooperation towards public goods, which leads into the leader essentially makes rules which are made keeping in mind a selfless decision which is profitable for all the participants in the society. But it often happens that this responsibility of enforcing or this responsibility of keeping cooperation in check is confused as power, and corruption seeks it. Isn't it a better idea to actually have a self-sustained system? Isn't it a better idea if all of us commonly are decentralized and we try to cooperate with each other in a decentralized manner? Wouldn't that be nice if there is one section of uneducated people and the educated section of the society rushes to these people to teach them and to share their knowledge with them as a part of their cooperation towards the society? And these members who are not maybe educated in the textbook sense might have certain amount of skill set, and they rush towards other sections of society to teach their specific skill sets to others. Wouldn't that be a nicer system? Wouldn't it be nicer if the pharmacy companies come together, instead of running in the races of patents, come together and develop a drug and accelerate their findings in order to reduce cost and reduce time in developing new drugs? Wouldn't that be a better model? Turns out that there are such models in our current society and they are doing extremely well. Any guesses? So, you all have phones, right? They work on Android. Android is something which is free. It has been free and made decentralized to everyone. And everyone takes up these modules in Androids and they develop their own applications, own softwares, and figure out how they can use this technology. Linux, Android, open source, all these are actually examples of people decentralizing, giving up their power, decentralizing knowledge to everyone, and they all coming together for a common goal, development of a technology in this case. How do these systems work so efficiently? The answer is very simple. The answer is communication. These Android and Linux systems, they have got amazing websites like Stack Exchange on which people post questions and queries or whatever difficulties they have, the challenges which they face, they put it up and they get replies within minutes. That sense of responsibility towards this technology, which every participant owns and comes together in order to just develop the technology, is something beautiful. And it must be learned by us, and it must be this module of communication which we have should be used. So my lesson from this very simple model of bundle fibers has been this. I spent quite a lot of time in understanding and reading a lot of literature about it till I came to some conclusions which actually then seemed quite intuitive. The lesson which I have actually found out, which has been mathematically enforced into me, is now this, that we should not only communicate, but we should communicate the best form of ourselves towards the society. This will ensure conversations and talks between various sections of society. And in this current time in which different sections of society have their evolving needs, it will be helpful in making a cooperative structure in which all the sections of society work together towards progress. Because we should remember that if we do not walk together and leave someone behind, we are encouraging them to defect, and their responsibility will come up back to us in some way, and we have to again pay back in various forms, which will end up us losing our own peace. So next time when you are faced with a dilemma that should you consider for doing for defecting for your selfish needs, or you should consider cooperation for each member of your participating society, I hope you'll make an informed choice. Thank you very much.